Thank you so much, Randy. Thanks for that great introduction. I may have to take you on the road next time in Iowa, so you can do all my introductions for me. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for supporting the Story County GOP. Brett and Jeff, thank you for your leadership in the county. I especially want to thank the dinner committee. I got here a little early today when this room was pretty empty, and they worked very hard to pull off an excellent dinner, so let's give them all a round of applause as well. Thank you. And I want to thank all of the great legislators you have here, Rob and Dave and Jesse, and thanks all to the local and county officials and to the candidates as well, like Kara and James and Nico. It's tough to put your name on the ballot sometimes, but we need good Republicans, and I'm sure that you're going to win this fall, and you're going to inspire a lot more good Republicans to run in the next election as well. And, you know, most important, I just want to thank all of you who have been loyal, hardworking Republicans for many years. Many of you in Iowa, like in Arkansas until not too long ago, seemingly toiling in the vineyards without producing a lot of fruit. But you see the fruits of your labor by the great elected representatives you have in the state capitol and in the United States Congress. You're the backbone of the Republican Party. You perform the most important mission we have, which is to elect Republicans to every office from city council to the White House, because the American people count on us to protect our nation and to protect our way of life. That's what Americans depend on the Republican Party to do, and the Republican Party in Iowa has done a great job of that. You've sent two of the very best United States senators to Washington, Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst, and I know you're going to send Chuck Grassley back later this year. And I can tell you, between Randy and Ashley and Marinette, y'all have a great group of freshman congressmen who have taken the Capitol by storm. And once Zach Nunn sends Cindy Axne packing, you're going to have an entirely Republican congressional delegation. And that's what we need, because the path to a majority in Washington, in the House and the Senate, runs straight through Iowa. We cannot have a majority in the United States House or the United States Senate without all three of your representatives reelected and Zach Nunn in Washington and Chuck Grassley reelected. And Lord knows we need them because of all of the failures of the Biden Democrats. There's so many failures, we have to set up jars to have votes on them at your dinners. And there's not enough jars for them either. I mean, Joe Biden didn't just cause the nation's problems, he has no solutions for them. Zero. Oh, maybe I should be fair. He does have some solutions, I think. He knows that inflation is hurting working families and that prices are going up. He just doesn't understand why all of you can't have your son make some finger paintings and sell them to a bunch of rich Democrats for $500,000. Or, you know, crime is, as Randy said, crime is rising all across America. Unfortunately, it's rising especially high in Democratic-run cities like Washington, D.C. But Joe Biden did tell me recently that he's helped stop crime in Washington, at least on the White House grounds and in the White House itself. And I said, really, stop crime in the White House? How'd you do that? He said, we took money laundering and corruption and drug dealing to zero. I said, how did you do that? He said, I told Hunter Biden to get out. But,
That's good.
But seriously, people, Joe Biden and the Democrats in Washington have no solutions because they are the problem. And that's why the American people turn to the Republican Party to protect them, to protect our country, and to protect our way of life. And I will talk to you a little bit tonight about what we're protecting and what it means and how we do it. You know, we just celebrated the 4th of July, and I know a lot of you probably marched in 4th of July parades for that, or you celebrated the 4th of July with your kids. And that's what I did with my kids. And it's a little hard. Sometimes they're 7 and 5 to get them focused on the true meaning of the 4th of July. It's frankly a little hard to get them to focus on the true meaning of Christmas when the presents are under the tree. But on Sunday night, I was reading a kid's book about the Declaration to my 7-year-old. And, you know, we read all about the French and Indian War and all the tax acts that came after that and the rebellion and the Declaration. And he was really into it. He's into war stories. And he said, Daddy, when you were in the Army, did you serve with George Washington? And I was like, I'm not quite that old, son. He's like, Oh, yeah, right. You served in Vietnam. And I said, no, son, that was Grandpa Lynn that served in Vietnam. He's like, oh, yeah, you were in Iraq. He's like, yeah, that's right, son, I was in Iraq. And we continued to read about the Declaration and about the war for independence and what the fight for freedom meant to our founding fathers. And then he said, Daddy, do they celebrate the 4th of July in England? And I said, no, son, they're still pretty sore about that. He said, well, what are they going to do tomorrow then, Dad? I said, well, they're going to go to work tomorrow because it's just another day. But here, we're celebrating our birthday, which is a strange thing for a country to have. Not many countries have birthdays. Certainly not many great countries have birthdays. But we do, because we were born, as Abraham Lincoln said, conceived in liberty, dedicated to that proposition that all men are created equal. And I'm very proud of my sons that the next day, for the first time, after 6 tries with my 7-year-old and 4 tries with my 5-year-old, I got them to sit through an entire reading of the Declaration of Independence. It wasn't easy. Thank you. Give them a round of applause. It wasn't easy. They interrupted a lot. There were a lot of words in that old document they didn't understand. Daddy, what's a usurpation? Daddy, what's quartering of troops? But there's one word that the 7-year-old did understand. When they got to the end, and they got to the closing sentence, and it said that with a firm reliance on divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And he turned and he looked at me and he said, the last word is honor. I said, yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it, son? He said, yeah, it is. I said, son, 56 men signed that document. Think about what they were doing. They were rebelling against the mightiest nation on earth. And some of them lost their lives. And a lot of them lost their fortunes. Not a single one of them betrayed their honor or their country. And we owe it to them and every generation that came since then to hand down to you and the generations after you the same blessings of liberty that they gave to us because they were willing to stand up and fight for it. That's what this holiday is about. That's what this country is about. That's what our founding fathers did. And we're having a dinner tonight in honor of one of our great founding fathers who brought great honor and credit to this country. It's pretty cool to have a county named after Joseph Story. I think you may be the only one in the country. You know, in Arkansas, we got a Washington, we have a Jefferson, we have a Jackson, we even have a Lincoln and a Grant, 2 great Republican presidents. I think you may be the only Story County in America. But Joseph Story was a great man and a great jurist. He wrote those 3 volumes, he said, out of his reverential attachment to our Constitution. 3 volumes on our Constitution. I got to tell you, a lot of the people I work with couldn't even read 3 volumes, much less write them. And frankly, a lot of the Democrats haven't even read the Constitution, if you look at their ideas. But as we heard in the biography that Jeff read about Joseph Story, maybe his finest moment came at the end of his life in the famous Amistad case that was popularized in a movie by that name. A group of Africans who had been impressed into slavery on a Spanish slave ship and rebelled, and they came into America's jurisdiction, and Spain wanted them back. And Spain was a mighty empire that threatened the United States still. And John Quincy Adams, after he'd been a great diplomat, after he'd been a Secretary of State, after he'd been a president and lost, after he'd gone back to the House of Representatives, took up their case. These humble Africans who had no connection to our country. And he argued that case up to the Supreme Court, and Joseph Story sat on that bench, and he heard the case, and he wrote the opinion, and he said, we will respect their rights just as much as we respect the rights of all mankind. That's the promise of America here at home, and that's what we've always promised all of mankind, is to be that beacon of freedom, to protect the rights of all mankind and the rule of law, whether you are an emperor across the seas, whether you are someone who's been impressed into slavery. It's a great moment for Joseph Story and a great moment for our country. You ought to be proud to live in a county that's named after such a great founding father. I'm proud to be here with you tonight. And I'm also proud to continue Joseph Story's work, because protecting our rights and preserving our freedom for our kids and their kids is not just the work of judges, it's the work of every American. Not just the work of elected officials like me or Randy or state legislators, it's the work of all of you, of tens of millions of hard-working Americans who love this country and are willing to take the time to plan the dinners, to organize the committees, to knock on the doors, to make the phone calls, to sacrifice and give money to people who need it to run races. You can see the fruits of those labors as well, and not just see them in electing Republicans to the Congress or to your legislature or to county government. The same kind of work and energy that Randy described is why we have a constitutional majority on our Supreme Court that just a couple weeks ago reversed the historic tragedy of Roe v. Wade after 49 years of misguided jurisprudence. And in the same way that Joseph Story took a stand for those rights, Donald Trump, with very much the help of Chuck Grassley, leading the Judiciary Committee, and Republican senators, helped confirm 3 of those 6 justices who believe that the Constitution means what it says, and the Constitution should be understood as our founding fathers wrote it, not what a bunch of liberals wish it said. That's what it means to protect our rights. But again, Lord knows there's a lot more that we have to protect. You just look around you and you see the harms that Joe Biden's Democratic Party is inflicting on America. You're all living with it every single day, with the cost of gas and groceries and everything else you buy. This is not an accident. It didn't just happen. It's not bad luck that Joe Biden came to office at the wrong time. They did this. This was part of their plan. This was their design. This is what they said they would do. Joe Biden said when he campaigned for office that he was going to end fossil fuels. Barack Obama's energy secretary said we need gas to cost as much as it does in Europe, which is about $8 to $10. They're not there yet, but they're going for it. Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez want to eliminate all fossil fuels, every bit of it, for cars and trucks and tractors and electricity in just 10 years. They first said that 2 years ago, so now maybe it's just 8 years. Think about how bad they've made things already. Think about how bad it would be if they stayed in power. I just heard from a grocer a few days ago who said that sales of hot dog buns and hamburger buns were down in his store. Sales of white bread was up. Why is that? Because so many families are stretched so thin at the end of the month that when they think about a cookout for the 4th of July, they don't pay $3 for 8 hot dog buns. They just make do with white bread. Families have to make those kind of decisions every single day because the Democrats intentionally inflicted this energy crisis on us. And the inflation you see is not just at the pump, it's everywhere because of this energy crisis. Because everything you're eating and everything you're wearing and everything your kids are playing with, it was made with energy, it got to you with energy, and it was maintained with energy. And they've intentionally waged a war on America's energy sector. They did this on purpose, and they'll keep doing it. Just look what their solution is when you see this inflation. Is it to say we got it wrong, we made a mistake? Do they go to North Dakota and Texas and say, hey, can you pump some more oil? That would help us? No. Joe Biden goes begging to Iran and Venezuela for more oil. Looks down his nose at America's roughnecks and coal miners, while he and all of his liberal buddies ignore the Chinese slave labor that's used to make their solar panels, or the African child labor that's used to make the minerals that go into those solar panels. Joe Biden will not protect this country from the devastation he has wrought on families' budgets. He's the reason we're paying $5 a gallon for gas. He's the reason people can't afford groceries. Yet he won't take responsibility for it. He blames everyone but himself. He blames Donald Trump's tariffs on China. We had tariffs a lot longer or earlier than we had inflation, though. He blames Putin's price hike. We had inflation much earlier than we had Vladimir Putin's war of aggression on Ukraine, though. Joe Biden is to blame for this. But now, what is he going to do to try to solve his political problems? There have been reports recently that he's going to lift the tariffs on China, even though they didn't cause the inflation, even though we didn't have inflation for years with those tariffs in place. Why? Because he doesn't have any other answers, and he's panicked and he's desperate. Those tariffs were designed to give us leverage over China and to pressure them to buy more of the commodities you make here in Iowa or that we make in Arkansas. And more fundamentally, they were designed to force China to stop cheating and lying and stealing as they have been for 30 years. But Joe Biden's going to give it all away for nothing in return because he wants a political lifeline. What he should be doing is standing up to China and acknowledging what he refuses to even say is happening, that China is waging a Cold War against the United States. He explicitly says we're not in a Cold War. What he doesn't get is it's not our decision. If another country is waging a Cold War against you, you don't have a choice whether it's happening or not. You only have a choice whether we win it or lose it. And Joe Biden will lose to China because he is not tough enough to stand up to the Chinese communists. Joe Biden doesn't even think they're a real threat. He spent years, decades as a senator and a vice president celebrating China's rise, saying that a rising China was good for China and good for America, toasting Xi Jinping, the communist dictator of China, whenever he'd go to Beijing or Xi would come to Washington. Just on the campaign trail for president, when everybody knew what China had been doing. He said that China is not a competitor of ours. He said they're not bad folks. Whenever China unleashed a plague on the world that devastated our economy and has killed thousands of Americans, he still won't take the steps necessary to hold them accountable. Joe Biden will not protect America from communist China. Republicans have to. Otherwise, we will lose the Cold War that we're in against China. Joe Biden isn't tough enough to protect us against any threats we face. I mean, look at our southern border. Again, it's a crisis that's caused by the Biden Democrats. This is not an accident. It's not a mishap. It's not an unintended consequence. This is what they promised in the campaign. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris both said that they would decriminalize illegal immigration. They haven't quite taken that step because Congress wouldn't do that, but they have done it in effect. 2 million illegal aliens have entered our country in just 18 months with Joe Biden as president, adding to the 20 million already here. Joe Biden and the Democrats claim they're fleeing persecution in Central America. Well, Central America has a lot of countries that are less violent than Democratic-run cities like St. Louis and Chicago and Baltimore. Can't be that bad there. But I've been to the border. I've seen hundreds of migrants huddled under those bridges. I've talked to them. I've asked them, why? How did you get here? Why did you come? Not a single one of them said they were facing persecution because they're a woman, or because they're a Christian, or because they're in the political opposition party back home. Every one of them said, because I could get in, because Joe Biden, because I wanted a job. Why do you think those caravans wear shirts that say, Biden, let me in? Because that's the message they broadcast throughout the campaign, and that's the policies they pursued for the first 18 months of their administration. And it's not just a matter of border security, it's a matter of national security. We've lost more than 100,000 of our fellow citizens each of the last few years to overdoses. Almost all of those drugs come from cartels in Mexico. Our communities have faced terrible illegal immigrant crimes, as happened to Molly Tibbetts here in Iowa. The cartels are responsible for thousands and thousands of deaths every year in America. Cartels are responsible for more deaths, in fact, each year in America than we lost in the entire Vietnam War over 20 years. And Joe Biden has no plan to protect America from the drugs and the violence of those cartels. Let me just make one suggestion. Ask yourself, what would we do if Al-Qaeda or ISIS set up shop in Monterey or Juarez or Tijuana? And whatever you think that is, that's exactly what we should do to the cartels until they are destroyed, until our border is closed, and we have protected the American people from the crime, the drugs coming across that border. And you know, finally, and most fundamentally, Americans expect us to protect their rights and to protect their freedom. The purpose of our free government, after all, is the freedom of our people. It's not the power and the authority of petty little bureaucrats like Tony Fauci. It's the freedom of our people, the freedom to worship your God and speak your mind and raise your kids and earn your living without the leave of government. Only Republicans will protect those freedoms. Look at what the Democrats do. They invent rights found nowhere in the Constitution, like the right to an abortion. Yet they refuse to defend rights that are explicitly protected in the Constitution, like your right to keep and bear arms. Thank goodness that we have that constitutional majority on the Supreme Court, which just struck down New York's gun-grabbing law a couple weeks ago, saying that you as an American citizen have a right to carry a firearm to protect yourself and protect your families, and you don't need a special reason or special permission from the government. The reason you get to do that is because you're a free American. And the American people expect Republicans to protect those rights, and not just from government, frankly. They expect us to protect their rights from all of these left-wing corporations and big tech companies that are being used as, in effect, an adjunct arm of the government to suppress your speech or to police your conduct outside the workplace or to interfere with our elections, to condemn our legislatures for reflecting the conservative views of our people. The American people expect and need us to protect their freedom. I know these things are a lot to ask. I know it's a tall order, and I know it seems like things are going in the wrong direction right now in America, and they are. But you know, things were going in a pretty bad direction in the Carter era as well. I don't see anyone around here old enough to have been there. Maybe one or two. But look what all it took to turn it around was one big election with Ronald Reagan and a new Republican Senate. Now, maybe we're in a deeper hole right now than we were in 1979 and 1980. Joe Biden used to run around last year talking about how he was going to be the next FDR. I bet most of you, like me, would just be happy if he could claw his way back to only being as bad as Jimmy Carter. But the American people expect us to protect them, and to do that, we have to keep working hard and to win this next election here in Iowa and all across the country. And I'll just leave you with one final story about a question I get a lot about my time in the Army. Really, I got it when I was in the Army as well from my civilian friends. They would ask, why does the flag fly in reverse on the soldier's uniform on the right shoulder? And it does. It flies with the blue field forward. And I said, well, the answer is very simple. In the old days, when cavalry was horse-mounted and they'd mount cavalry charges, and the colors would go with the soldiers, if you were on the right side of the formation, the flag would appear in reverse. And that's why still today, long since we got rid of almost all the horses that we have in the Army, the flag flies in reverse on the soldier's uniform. It's a reminder to all of our enemies and a reassurance to all of our friends that our Army never retreats. It always advances. And at a time when America is under assault and our way of life is under attack, I think that's a pretty good lesson for all of us Republicans. We will never retreat. We will never surrender. We will never back down. We will never quit in the defense and protection of this great nation. Thank you all. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.